Hello, my name is Jennifer, and I am most likely addicted to true crime. Hello, my name is Jennifer, and I am most likely addicted to true crime. Hello, my name is Jennifer.
Autopsy reports released showed both kids had gunshot wounds to the head, and one of the children also died from, quote, incised neck wounds. Her third child, an 11-year-old, along with Singler herself, were injured and treated at a hospital. This incident was originally a burglary call, but police said there was no evidence of a burglary. Singler ran off to the UK shortly after she was released from the hospital herself.
Welcome in. I hope you all are warm and cozy. Hopefully the sound of my heater doesn't overpower the sound of my microphone, but I'm not willing to shut either of them off tonight. So a quick reminder before we get started that all defendants are innocent until proven guilty, because the presumption of innocence is for everyone, even assholes. Just had to get that out of the way because with this case and so many others, it's kind of hard to do that, but the presumption of innocence is important. So anyhow, Kimberlee Singler, the Colorado Springs woman accused of drugging and killing two of her children in December of 2023, won't see a preliminary hearing until May of 2026 due to an inadvertent delay in the receiving of evidence. So that's the headline for tonight. Singler's case has been through many twists and turns since her arrest in the United Kingdom on December 30th of 2023, which was 11 days after Colorado Springs police responded to a burglary call at her home that investigators later determined was fake. Singler, who is now 37, faces 7 felony charges in the 4th Judicial District Court, including 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. She appeared in person for a short hearing on January 7th, 2026. She was in the custody of the El Paso County Criminal Justice Center, where she remains on a no-bond hold. She was wearing a bright green jumpsuit, and she was shackled at the wrists and ankles. Kimberlee Singler displayed little emotion during the hearing, mostly looking down at the ground. Singler's defense counsel, which consists of public defenders Jennifer Cox and Kimberlee Chalmers, waived the formal reading of her charges and the advisement. A preliminary hearing or proof evident presumption great bond hearing was scheduled to last the majority of the day on May 11th of 2026. Typically, a preliminary hearing is held within 35 days of the defendant's first appearance. However, attorneys on the case said that because no discovery or evidence of any kind has been released to either party, and this was as of January 7th, the defense was willing to waive that timeline. So the defense was willing to waive the timeline, which basically pauses the clock. And because the defense was willing to waive it, then that means the court is not infringing upon her right to a speedy trial. Kilo's in the house. I don't know if you guys can hear him. Okay. Several defense motions were also addressed. Notably, Judge William Bain ruled that no personal information of the remaining family shall be shared, and no government workers, aside from jail staff, can have contact with Singler. In addition, Judge Bain ordered the preservation of all evidence, both physical and digital. According to the Colorado Springs Gazette, it was a relatively packed courtroom with dozens of people in the gallery to support the victims and families. And so that's the latest update on court appearances. with the next scheduled appearance being the preliminary hearing on May 11th. So at this point on this channel, we've studied the affidavit of probable cause, we watched the press conference, we reviewed the various press releases. I crafted an independent timeline. And of course, it's limited. We only have so much information at this point, but it's very thorough considering how limited my access to information is at this point. What else have we done? Oh, we broke down the false narratives of Kimberlee Singler, the defendant, and her daughter, the 11-year-old female, and also we reviewed the grandmother's, I won't say dishonest, let's say misguided. We've reviewed the grandmother's misguided statements as well. I won't be doing any more live streams on this case until that preliminary hearing gets a little bit closer. I will still be releasing a video every Saturday at 8 p.m. Mountain, but rather than a live stream, it will probably be, a premiere of a pre-recorded video where I've edited out all of my stumbling and tried to put something together with more of a focus on quality than quantity. If there's not something actively happening, I just don't see the use in going live just for the sake of going live. And I know that, the community isn't going to build itself, but at the same time, I want the channel to be, I appreciate the fellowship and the communication and the discussion and all the discourse, but I want it to be less of like a chat room type community and more of an archive of, factual information and research and case studies. And, naturally we build bonds in the community, right? But I don't want that to be the focus of what we're doing here. So I really want to put some effort into making some videos that serve more like short documentaries than a live stream. And I have some new technology behind the scenes that just might help me do that without making it look like I created the video in my bathtub. I mean, it's still probably going to, but I'm hoping for a little bit of improvement. Anyway, I'm going to give myself a chance to learn the software and start putting out those pre-recorded videos. And if anything is happening in the active cases, which right now I only have 2, Barry Morphew and Kimberlee Singler. So if anything is happening with either of those cases, I'll be going live. Other than that, just expect those pre-recorded videos. Anyway, so we've already been through, all of that stuff, with the affidavit and the press conference and the releases and all of the stuff that we've already done. And now we just wait for that preliminary hearing. I was really surprised that neither side had any discovery evidence as of January 7th. But so that was a Wednesday, and they did say that they expected to have that information exchanged between both sides by the end of the week. So that would have been Friday, January 9th. So hopefully now, which is January 24th is when I'm recording this, hopefully by now that discovery evidence has been exchanged. I don't know if they will wait until after the preliminary hearing to bring competency into question. I don't even honestly know for sure that they will, that the defense will bring competency into question. But one of the public defenders is the same original public defender in Colorado's case against Letitia Stout. And one of the first times that Letitia really got frustrated with her counsel through the public defender's office was because they pushed upon her. They raised the question of competency, and they did it at a time that Letitia didn't want her competency to come into question. She was still trying to blame others. She was going on crime. She was doing interviews with Crime Online saying that, her husband was responsible and his friend Edgar. She had made Facebook posts about how Landon was responsible. Anyway, I digress. That's the first thing that really upset Letitia with those public defenders that are now representing Kimberlee Singler. And I just can't imagine that they won't bring competency up as an issue. Anyway, so for tonight's purposes, for this live stream, what I wanted to do is I wanted to revisit the media questions from the end of the press conference. And I wanted to kind of ask myself and ask you guys what you think, knowing everything that we know now, having reviewed the limited public information that we have available. What questions do you have that you hope will be answered, not even necessarily at trial, but what questions do you have that you hope will be answered during that preliminary hearing that's coming up in May? And so I prepared, I prepared some clips to include those media questions, and we'll review those on the other side. Let me see. I haven't even checked in with chat. Tinkerbell got a gifted membership. So excited. I was gifted a membership. You're welcome, Tinkerbell. We always appreciate your input, and your participation absolutely matters to me, and I appreciate you. And I appreciate everyone. But Tinkerbell says, out of respect, I will not say my weather conditions. And Jill is in southern New Mexico. And so Jill, you use the word chilly. She says, I'm in southern New Mexico, almost as far south in New Mexico as you can get, but it's been chilly the last 2 days. Now I'm sitting here, and at last time I looked at the temperature, it was exactly 1 degree outside. And so when you say chilly, what do you mean chilly? You mean like 70? Or anyway, Tinkerbell's in Tampa, so that really says all that we need to know. And before we even watch, Tinkerbell's got a question. She says, I really want to know how she was able to leave the country so fast. And that is an excellent question. I'm going to put a star on it, and we are definitely going to discuss it at the end of these clips. And Jill says high 40s and low 50s. Yeah, Colorado Springs is a little bit colder than that, you show off. Okay, let's get to it.
The case number is 2023 CR 5656. It is a seven-count complaint that includes the following charges. 2 counts of murder in the first degree after deliberation and with intent. Those are Class 1 felony charges. 2 counts of murder in the first degree, victim, child under 12 years of age, also a Class 1 felony. 1 count of attempted murder in the first degree after deliberation and with intent, a Class 2 felony. 1 count of attempted murder in the first degree, child under 12 years of age, a Class 2 felony, and 1 count of assault in the first degree, a Class 3 felony. And then with that, we would open for any questions. Obviously, we're not going to try this case in the media. We will do that through the courtroom. So any factual questions, we are going to defer answering those. But any process questions, depending on what they are, we may be able to answer those. So if there are any questions.
I can start us off. Had child welfare agencies had any prior contact with the family before any of this incident?
Before the initial incident?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's getting too much into the facts of the underlying investigation. We're not going to answer that today. And again, that's to protect the trial process itself. Yes.
What was the reaction from the victim's family when you told them that Ms. Singler was finally back in the United States after so many years-long extradition process? And what have you told them to prepare them for, like you said, this isn't a finish line, there's still a lot left in the trial?
Yeah, well, you can imagine just in a general sense, anytime victims have to wait this long just to get the sort of criminal justice process started can be very frustrating, and that is surely the case here. There's a sense of relief and knowing that now we can really get started on that justice-seeking process. Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned that there's some cases that take up to decades to be able to have the extradition process move forward. What was the difference with Ms. Singler's case that was able to push that to 2 years?
Well, so the question is, why is this case different than other cases in extradition that because this case was able to get extradited within 2 years as opposed to longer periods of time? I think ultimately that comes down to the collaboration between our local partners working with, Department of Justice, State Department, and then our partners in the UK as well, making sure that we had good communication with them, getting them the information they needed to be able to work this through as quickly as they possibly could. And then also just really strong diligence and work from their end too to make sure that the courts had the information they needed to make a good, sound decision. And that's where we are today.
Is there any update with that surviving child with, how they're doing or if they're living with the grandma? Just anything?
Yeah, I'm going to defer questions on that just because it could delve into the facts. The question is, are there any updates on the surviving child? She's now 13 years old. She will be, as you can guess, she'll be an integral witness for us in the trial, subsequent trial. So we're going to stay away from some of those questions for now, but I appreciate the question.
Singler's representation in the UK had made some comments claiming that there were flaws within the CSPD investigation, specifically that her daughter's witness statement was non-voluntary. Is there any response or thoughts or comments that you would like to kind of give in relation to those?
Yeah, so the question is based on Singler's representation in the UK, making claims that her interview and any confessions or statements that she might have made in the investigation were involuntary when it was being investigated by CSPD. That's getting really into the facts. There are going to be tons of issues that we're going to litigate in this case prior to us getting to trial. I'm sure that will be one of them. But I can tell you that in a general sense, not this case specifically, but in a general sense, CSPD, Colorado Springs Police Department, especially under the leadership of Chief Vasquez, is one of the preeminent law enforcement agencies in the United States. I'm very confident in their investigation. I know the investigators that worked on this case put in a ton of hard work to give us the best possible case for prosecution going forward. Yes.
Question for me. I know you mentioned it, or it was mentioned earlier on, but just to kind of wrap it up, what is the process now with her case moving forward after today?
Yeah, so the question is, what is the process going forward from today going forward? And I mentioned it in my statements at the beginning. So in the coming days, she'll have basically a bond advisement and a first appearance. That will be fairly quick. It'll be probably by video. She will then be given the right to a preliminary hearing. That's required to be held within 30 days of her first appearance. It's not uncommon for a case of this magnitude that defense may ask for more time to be prepared for that preliminary hearing. So don't be surprised if it actually occurs later than 30 days. And then at that preliminary hearing, that's when we'll present some evidence to satisfy the court that we have enough evidence to move towards trial. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, so those were the media questions. Let me put a different. We've also got our mugshot. I do have a couple of other photos. So this is what Kimberlee Singler looks like today. This is what Kimberlee Singler looked like 2 years ago. And prior to that, this is even back a little bit further. So that is quite the transformation. And who knows how she will continue to transform all the way to prison, in my opinion, allegedly. Okay, so the media questions. So one of the media questions was, whether or not child welfare agencies had any prior contact with the family. And, he couldn't really say because that was too far into the facts. And then somebody asked what the reaction of the family was, and he said that they were relieved, or they felt relief. And of course, they asked for updates on the surviving child. And of course, Mike Allen was unable to answer, at this time, obviously. But he did call her an integral witness, and he just wasn't comfortable answering questions about her. And then there was another question, I can't remember what it was. But the one that really stuck out to me that I wanted to talk to you guys about is, so somebody asked, they said Miss Singler's representation in the UK claimed there were flaws with CSPD's investigation, specifically that her daughter's witness statement was non-voluntary. And then he asked for thoughts or comments from the district attorney. And Mr. Allen, he made it sound like the admissibility of her statements, he made it sound like the admissibility of Kimberlee's statements were also in question. So not only the 11-year-old female's witness statements, but also Kimberlee Singler's witness statements. Now, this was her representation in the UK. This was not in a United States court. But, Mike Allen, he said, and I wrote down the quote, "There are going to be tons of issues that we are going to litigate in this case prior to us getting to trial. I'm sure that will be one of them." And so, that's a little bit, I'm not going to say it's worrisome or troublesome. But it does make me wonder why. And what would that look like? Let's say that the defense files a motion to have Kimberlee's statements and the 11-year-old female's statements, the ones that they made from the scene, the ones that they made at the hospital, those, what if those get thrown out and all they have is the one interview with, the interview with Kimberlee at the police station, and then the forensic interview with the 11-year-old female? How much does that affect the case? Surely they can still prove all sorts of lies. I don't know. It'll be interesting. But I really paid attention to that question because it sounded like Mike Allen was ready to argue for those statements to be left in. And I hope that everything was done in such a way where they don't get thrown out. We've seen all kinds of things, like with Barry Morphew, for example. You look at the witness testimony that wasn't able to be presented in that case. And that had such a huge effect, and they ended up dismissing the charges the first time. And now they're back to prosecuting him again. Let me see if I have a copy of the comment. Yep, there it is. Okay, so this is a comment that was made on one of my Barry Morphew videos. And so somebody said, "The autopsy revealed the presence of BAM in Suzanne's system. Only one person in the state of Colorado has access to BAM, Barry Morphew. Barry Morphew's cell phone activity was present where Suzanne's bike helmet was discovered. He says he was asleep when his cell phone activity showed he was moving around. Where there's smoke, there's fire." To which I responded, "While I agree that the facts you've outlined here are compelling, I also know that the facts can change, and evidence can be thrown out before trial, or even worse, disproven at trial in the presence of a jury. I'm looking forward to hearing his defense. It seems like an open and shut case to me, but seems is a very dangerous word to use in the context of professional journalism." Or so I've heard. So yes, we know about the BAM because of the limited public information that we've been granted access to. And that is incredibly compelling. But like I said, in my comment, evidence can be thrown out before it gets to trial, or, disproven or argued against, in such a way that the jury doesn't give it credit. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Barry Morphew's case, and I'm not saying that's going to happen in Kimberlee Singler's case. I'm just saying that it's possible. And stuff like that really does happen all that time. Or, I'm sorry, all that time. All the time. In another case recently, so this case on the screen now is Colorado v. Jimmy West, and that one's up in Boulder County. And it went to trial right before Christmas. And the whole time, I mean, for a year, the headlines talked about how the victim's boyfriend had sold her for drugs on the day that she was killed by Jimmy West. And by the time we got to trial, the boyfriend was never called as a witness. I ordered and paid for a copy of a digital copy of the boyfriend's mugshot. He was arrested on something else and then questioned about this case. And I even paid for it, and they never sent me his mugshot. The boyfriend came up during trial a few times, but it was always a red herring. And at no time did the jury hear that the boyfriend sold her for drugs on the day she was killed. What they heard was something entirely different. And that was different. The prosecution told a different story at trial than they did in the affidavit of probable cause. Most of the elements of the story were still there, but they erased the boyfriend out of the story like he didn't even exist. And I don't know why they did it, but also I wasn't following this case closely enough that I was watching all of the pretrial hearings. And so maybe something happened and was argued before trial, and maybe the judge ordered that his witness testimony be thrown out, so then they don't have it anymore. I don't know, because I didn't follow closely enough that I paid attention to every single hearing or motion. Now I can look back now and find out. I just haven't done it yet. And speaking of this case, hold on, it's across the room. Let me grab it. Now that the trial has taken place in Colorado's case against Jimmy West, I started looking into FOIA requests, and I received some information back. So I asked for the case file in this case, and this is how they responded. It says, "Thank you for your request. The case requested is very large, including almost 9,000 pages of discovery, many hours of body-worn camera, digital media, and various other digital evidence items. Due to the sensitive nature of the case, in addition to the size of the case file, we are not able to release the entire case file. We will put the interviews requested and provide a cost estimate for their release. As for the body cam footage, we ask that you please be specific in what footage you are requesting by including the date, time, and officer the footage belongs to, if possible. All requests are charged at $30 per hour, with the first hour free. A $25 search and retrieval charge may also be included. Hard copies of requested items, blah, 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 blah." Okay. So then they sent another response that says, "Thank you for your interest in the public information of Boulder County District Attorney. Your request was received on January 8th and given the reference number, blah, 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 for tracking purposes. You will be contacted about the availability of records." Oh, I'm sorry. That whole page was blah, blah, blah. Maybe this is the right one. You can tell I just pulled it out of my inbox. Okay. Oh, yeah, here we go. "Dear Jennifer Knight, it has been determined that the charge for the production of the interviews you have requested will exceed $30. The Boulder County District Attorney is providing you with an itemized estimate of the anticipated charges. Fees charged, $30 per hour with the first hour free, plus a $25 search and retrieval fee. Labor charged, 30 hours. Estimated total, $895. Deposit due, $895. If you do not respond to this letter within 30 days after the date this statement is sent, your request will be deemed withdrawn unless you have advised Okay, the rest is blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the point is the case file is more than 9,000 pages. They wouldn't give me all of it, but they'll work on it for 30 hours and charge me $895. I still don't really know what that means. Anyway, that's not why we're here tonight. But since I had it on the screen, it was on my mind, and I just wanted to let you guys know where I was at with records requests on that case. The whole point, the reason I even brought that case up is because, and on the screen right now is Zariah Hardy. And this image of her was from 2023. She ended up homeless on the streets of Boulder County, strung out on drugs, and 7 months later, when she was killed, she weighed only 87 pounds, which was 7 months after this photo was taken. She only weighed 87 pounds. Because it dealt with the homeless community. I mean, I'm thinking, how big was Letitia Stauch's? Let me check really quick. I can't remember how many pages her case file was. Letitia Stauch. The jail file was 3,000 pages, but the case file. Okay, so Letitia Stauch's case file was only 1,050 pages. The case file for Jimmy West is 9,000 pages. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. Anyway, okay, I'm going to get off of that topic. The whole point, the whole reason I brought it up is because how much information can change from the time of the affidavit of probable cause, which is really all we have access to at this point, to the time it gets to trial. I mean, yeah, listen, we know what we know. We know what they've told us. We know it's only a small portion. But unless we watch every single motion, we're not going to know what is excluded and not shown to the jury. Yeah. Anyway, so just going back to my notes. Sorry, I got so far off track there. It happens. Let's see. We'll put that one back up. So back to my notes. So I did find it notable that the judge in this case, as of right now, is Judge William Bain, and he is the chief judge of the district. And again, if you guys remember back to the case against Letitia Stauch, Judge Bain is the one who presided over the conflict hearings when Letitia was firing her public defenders and rehiring them and firing them again and getting private counsel through the state. The judge in the case was Gregory Werner, but when there was a conflict, that's when it was brought to this judge, who is the chief judge. And so I'm glad to know that the chief judge in the district is, as of right now, hearing the case against Kimberlee Singler. I underlined the part where it said, no government workers aside from jail staff can have contact with Kimberlee Singler. And I wonder why. And what do you mean government workers? What government workers have had contact with her? I don't know. I just, for that to be a motion from the January 7th hearing, or I'm sorry, not a motion, but an order from the judge ordered that no government workers can have contact with her while she's in custody. And it just makes me wonder why. So that's one question I have is, what happened and why can't they? Let me see. Oh, I couldn't remember. So it's been a while since I watched anybody's proof evident presumption great bond hearing, preliminary hearing, whatever you want to call it. I know that if it's a grand jury indictment, there is no proof evident presumption grade hearing. There's no preliminary hearing when it's a grand jury indictment. This was not a grand jury indictment. Instead, it was an affidavit of probable cause, which means that she is, granted that preliminary hearing. That's the one that Letitia wanted to waive so desperately. She did not want that hearing to happen. Anyway, I know it's still pretty one-sided, and I know that some evidence will be presented at that time. But when the preliminary happens, she will not yet have answered to the charges, meaning, like if she is going to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, she will not have done that yet by the time May rolls around and we have that preliminary. I don't think the defense is able to present any sort of argument at that hearing. I mean, I think that the defense can maybe cross-examine the witnesses that the prosecution may bring, but I don't think that the defense is given an opportunity to present their side of anything outside of cross at that preliminary hearing, if I'm remembering correctly. But as you know, I am not an attorney. So that's one question I have. I want to have a better idea of what to expect during the preliminary hearing. And at that time, will we know immediately what her answer is going to be, or do we have to wait for a separate hearing? I don't know. The biggest question that people have asked, like in the comment section, since I started talking about this case recently, the biggest question everybody has is whether or not the father got custody of the 11-year-old female. And I don't know. I don't even know that we'll know that after the preliminary. I'm not sure. But I did make a note that, the 11-year-old female, who obviously is 13 now, she was only 6 years old when her parents separated and filed for divorce. And at the time, her brother was only 2 and her sister was only 4. And I know there are pictures of like the kids and their dad. I don't know how often Kimberlee allowed him to even see them. I've looked at some of the court paperwork on the custody stuff and the back and forth there. But also we don't, when the 11-year-old female did finally come clean and tell the truth to either her foster parent or the caseworker, somebody with the state or working on behalf of the state, with the 11-year-old girl, when she finally came clean to that person, most of it was redacted. And so we don't know. We just don't know. I mean, so my question, the only other question that I have written down here on my notes is, I want to know, was the 11-year-old female offered some sort of immunity, or maybe she was given a proffer agreement in exchange for honest, no consequence testimony at trial? I mean, do you give an 11-year-old a proffer? I don't know. I don't know how that works, but do you give an 11-year-old immunity? I'm not saying that she had anything to do with it. All I know is that she lied about it on multiple occasions and then allegedly came clean, but we haven't seen that for ourselves yet. So those are my questions. And then let me just go back through chat. I started some questions from earlier when we were watching the clips. And, before we started, Tinkerbell said, I really want to know how she was able to leave the country so fast. And Jilly Bean said, I brought this up last live, but not only how did she get out of the country so fast, but again, with what money? And then Tinkerbell said, did she have a pre-planned ticket purchased? And I don't know. I don't know. But we can speculate, and I think it would be best to go back to the timeline to speculate. So then Tinkerbell said, yes, where did the money come from? And if it was purchased day of, that had to be a lot of money. And yes, definitely. I lost my place in chat. Dee Dee, I'm not sure if I said hi to you. It's good to see you. And let's see, Tinkerbell says, are you only doing cases in Colorado? I'd love your input on the catfish trial in Virginia. And I'm technically only doing cases in Colorado, but I am, in fact, a true crime junkie. And I would be happy to talk to you about any cases. I just probably won't be doing it in a public live stream. Let's see. And so Tinkerbell says, what's the difference between grand jury and preliminary? So it's really the difference. The difference is in the charging. And either the district attorney's office files an affidavit of probable cause, which is just enough information to warrant or to justify a warrant for the arrest of the suspect. And that's with an affidavit of probable cause, and then an arrest warrant, and then the person is arrested. And then within 35 days, they're supposed to get a preliminary hearing, which is a bond hearing. Right now, she's being held with no bond. And it's possible that a bond could be set at that preliminary hearing. But if it's a grand jury indictment, then a grand jury gets together and they decide, and that's Colorado voters, and that grand jury gets together and they are presented only evidence from the prosecution. Because at this point there is no defense, no one has been arrested, right? There's no defendant if the case hasn't been charged yet. And so it goes before that grand jury and they decide if the grand jury is going to hand down an indictment, which serves as, that is basically the same thing as a warrant for the arrest of the suspect. So it's either the affidavit of probable cause or a grand jury indictment. And if there is a grand jury indictment, that means that grand jury has already decided that there is enough evidence to move forward, and then you don't have to have that preliminary hearing. What I'd like to do is I will look for someone else's explanation of that has more business explaining it than I do, and maybe I can add that as a clip in a future video or live stream. Let's see. Right, and Julie says she's obviously a flight risk. Why would they let her bond out? And I can't imagine that they would. But due process is important, and she's got to have all of the rights that she is due, not because she deserves them, but because they're for everyone. And if that was you or me or your mama up there, you would want them to have all of their rights and go through due process and be rightfully convicted in such a way that it does stick and is not thrown out on appeal because we didn't follow the rules. Yeah, my biggest questions, there's so much mystery, of course, around the 11-year-old female, and she is really the only key to what actually happened, because I can't imagine that, Kimberlee Singler is just going to decide to straighten up and fly right and tell the truth and confess and plead guilty for that matter. I don't know what she's going to do. I'm expecting that not guilty by reason of insanity plea. I'm expecting a couple of competency examinations. And who knows how long all of this is going to take. And so that's why I'm not in a big hurry to, go live about this case every week. And, when there's nothing to talk about, talk about outrage for the sake of outrage, and how much we despise this monster of a human being who's accused of doing what she's accused of doing. A little bit of that is fine, but I really want to focus on quality. And I'll try to save most of my outrage for, personal phone calls and things of that nature. Because this case is incredibly complex. Mike Allen said that during the press conference when she was first extradited, and he was telling the truth. It is incredibly complex, and I want to know more. Obviously, at the same time, I want to respect the people who are charged with maintaining the integrity of the investigation and the case itself. And Tinkerbell says, does it make any difference that there is no grand jury indictment? I mean, the evidence has to be overwhelming. Well, it's one or the other. And we read the affidavit of probable cause. It is, in my opinion, it's overwhelming. Just with what we were allowed to see. And we will, of course, be able, I think, to see more during that preliminary hearing, but it's not going to be all of it. We won't get all of it until trial, or until she finds some friggin' humanity and pleads guilty, and then we just go for the case file and the discovery evidence, and we look at that ourselves. And we watch these interviews that we've been told about, and we listen to the 911 call that we've been told about. And that would be ideal. I would love to cover this case in that way, where I just get on here to do a live stream one day because Kimberlee Singler has decided to plead guilty and spend the rest of her life in prison, where she, in my opinion, belongs. And that little girl is not forced, not just her, the grandmother, the ex-husband, the family, the friends, the aunts, the uncles, whatever. Nobody should have to go through what she is about to put people through. And they've been going through it for years already. I just can't imagine that she would do that. So anyway, those are really the questions. I mean, the main questions that I have are about, the state's main witness. And Tinkerbell says that's not happening. She is Letitia Stauch's evil twin. Well, I guess in that case, they would both be evil twins. And it's unfortunate. I mean, this is only happening, I mean, this is also in Colorado Springs, and Singler's got the same public defender, and it's the same district attorney and the same deputy, one of the same deputy district attorneys, or senior deputy district attorneys. Sorry. So many things are so similar, faking a burglary, blaming it on other people, ugly custody battles. I mean, my God, it's a lot going in. And I'm trying to keep the two cases separated in my mind to the best of my ability, but it's difficult. Even looking at the kids, it's difficult because the dark hair and I don't know, it's a lot. And excuse me, I'm going to continue working on the timeline, which I made some more adjustments to it today, And as soon as we get off of this live stream, which is going to be here within the next 10 minutes or so, as soon as we get off of this live stream, I'm going to go ahead and post this on the website. And you can find it at crimecurious.com/Kimberlee-Singler, which I'll go ahead and write that in the chat. Sorry, Jill. I'm taking your job. No. crimecurious.com/Kimberlee, if I can type -Singler. Okay, so that's where you'll be able to find it. And Jilly, what I'll do is I'll just go back and I'll set the Nightbot back up so that you just will have, commands that you can use that will pop up the links and stuff like that. And so anyway, so what other questions do you guys have? Obviously not that I can answer, but it doesn't hurt us to speculate. One of the questions that I was going to look in the timeline for, I can't remember. What was it? What were we going to look for? Let me get back to the printed timeline. Bear with me just a second. Custody. Oh, we were talking, sorry, I apologize. We were talking about whether or not her travel out of the country was pre-planned. And we have no way of knowing, but just looking back at the timeline. So if you go to page 4 on the timeline, that's where it's going over Monday, December 18th, which is the day that the children are killed. And the grandmother tries to reach Kimberlee several times throughout the day. That started actually on the previous page. So that all started, I've got it in bold there, with an emergency order that was filed in response to an emergency motion about the custody agreement. So Monday, December 18th, first thing in the morning, they had a hearing, and she was, she was demanded, she was ordered to have the kids, to exchange the custody. And it says the court strongly prefers that the exchange happen prior to court to avoid exposing the children to court proceedings. So she found out on Monday morning that she was due in court on Wednesday with the children if she hadn't already turned them over to her ex-husband. And I think that is what really set everything into motion. I mean, she was supposed to give the kids to her ex-husband on Saturday, December 16th, and she didn't do it. And then that Monday, she got something from the court, and it seems like, it was convenient because the grandmother was already gone, and she knew the grandmother was coming back, and that was who was supposed to find them and call the police, according to Kimberlee's plan, allegedly. And that didn't work out, but I feel like that court order Monday morning is what kicked her into motion. And I don't know when she would have made plans. And I have never left the United States. I've never been out of the country. I have many friends that live in other countries, but I've never stepped outside of the United States to go visit any of those friends. Not yet, anyhow. So I don't know how difficult it is to plan such a trip, impromptu, Colorado Springs to London. I wouldn't have the first clue. So if anybody has any experience in that department, that might be helpful for the purposes of our speculation. But then the grandmother doesn't come home, and so early middle of the night, Monday to Tuesday, Kimberlee calls 911 herself, and then she's released from the hospital on Tuesday the 19th. And then she does 2 more interviews at the Police Operations Center. And then on the 20th, she and her mother, the grandmother, go to a hotel. And the 11-year-old female was not allowed to go with them. She instead was put into custody of the state, the Department of Human Services, and then she was subsequently switched over to foster care. So it was just Kimberlee and her mother in this hotel room. And according to the grandmother, the last time she saw Kimberlee was 7:30 on December 23rd. So the kids are killed on the 18th, and the last time that Kimberlee is seen is 7:30 p.m. on the 23rd, so 5 days later. Can you be on your way to London 3 days after your last police interview, 5 days after you've allegedly killed your children? I just don't know. I don't know, but it seems like even for all of the trouble and the custody stuff that was going on before the event itself where the children were killed, it all seems like a buildup, but to try and speculate when she decided that she was going to leave the country, I don't know. I would say if I had to guess, I would guess that she decided that directly after that interview, her final interview with the police, where she met with one detective and her mother, the children's grandmother, met with the other detective. And then both of those detectives put them in a room together, Kimberlee and her mother, and then they watched from a different room. And the grandmother kind of confronted Kimberlee Singler on some of the inconsistencies, with her statements and things. And, that was on the 20th. So I would say sometime between the 20th and the 23rd, probably closer to the 20th. And who knows in that 3 days what those conversations with Kimberlee and her mother in a hotel room with, the mother's apartment is sealed off as a crime scene. And here she is, 2 of her grandchildren have been killed. One is in foster care after emergency surgery. And here she is with her injured daughter, who's 35 years old at the time, in this hotel room for 3 days. I would say sometime during that 3 days, Kimberlee said, forget this, I'm out. And other than that, I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it was pre-planned, but how would I know? How would I know? Let me check back in with you guys in chat, and then I think we're going to get out of here for tonight. Tinkerbell says, I just don't know how anyone could kill their own children. We lost my nephew yesterday, and we are all so heartbroken. Oh, Tinkerbell, I am so sorry. I obviously don't know any details, but I'm with Jilly. We're very sorry for your loss. And Jilly says, I accidentally took a wrong turn in El Paso and went over the border for 2 seconds, but other than that, never been out of the country either. Not a huge fan of flying. I don't mind flying. Excuse me. The air is so dry right now because it's so cold and my heater's been running nonstop. And let's be honest, I smoked for like 38 years. Anyway, reading Jill's comment, it makes me... So I've never left the country, but I did come really close back in 2023. So I started in Colorado Springs, and then I went and I spent a month in Silver City, New Mexico, Kilo and I. And then we went from Silver City, New Mexico, all the way to Virginia. And we did that by going down, dipping down in through Texas. And I had no idea that I was going to get so close to the border. And so it's the middle of the night. It's me and Kilo. I've got, I'm driving I don't remember what the year was, but it was a really big Ford Explorer. You know, it was a 4-door. It was closer to the size of an Expedition, but it was an Explorer. Anyway, I've got the seats laid down because, you know, Kilo and I are traveling across the country, and that vehicle was our tent. And we, you know, if we spent the night somewhere, it would be a truck stop, and I would just cover all the windows, and he and I would sleep in his dog bed in the back of the truck. You know, that it was an adventure. Anyway, it's the middle of the night. I'm in Texas where I don't belong, and I accidentally end up at an immigration checkpoint. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've taken a wrong turn somewhere. I'm going to end up like, I'm not trying to cross the border. I screwed up. I'm not supposed to be here. Anyway, so I'm all nervous because I'm thinking that, you know, I'm traveling alone with Kilo, counting only on my GPS, which apparently has screwed me over. So I look totally nervous when I get up to the checkpoint, and the guy, you know, flashes his flashlight in the car. He looks at me. He looks at Kilo, who's in the passenger side, like a proper road dog, you know. And then he flashes to the back of the Explorer, and it's filled with, you know, I mean, I know I'm going to be in Virginia for several months, so we've got all kinds of stuff back there. But it's, you know, it's all packaged up and sealed up, and so he asked me the normal questions, and I tell him, like, I'm not trying to leave the country. I'm just following my GPS. I'm going to Virginia. And he's like, "Oh, no, it's just a checkpoint. You're fine. You're not leaving the country." So I said, "Okay." So then he puts the flashlight back on Kilo, and he goes, "That's a good-looking dog. What's his name?" And without hesitation and without conscious thought, I said, "Bob." Because some part of me knew. Now listen, I had nothing illegal in the vehicle, okay? I'm traveling through Texas. Give me a break. In an older vehicle with Colorado tags? No. But without thought, I just said Bob because, you know, with the badge and the flashlight, I just didn't feel like telling this stranger who had a gun close to the border that my dog's name is Kilo. It doesn't look good. it just doesn't look good. And so I lied, and I gave my dog a fake name, and we made it through the immigration checkpoint. And so every once in a while I still call Kilo Bob, because that's his alias when we're too close to the border. me and Kilo have some road stories. Like my dog's name is Bob, and he's like, you know, he didn't say anything. He just told us we could go. So I was wide awake for a while after that little stop. And then the next night, so then I drove all the way through, and the next night I spent the night at a friend's house in Tennessee, before making the final leg of the trip over to Virginia. Anyway, that's what I think of whenever I think of crossing the border. That's as close as I've ever been, is lying to immigration about my dog's name. That's as close as I've ever been to leaving the country. Anyway, on that note, I am going to get off of here. Do expect a video to premiere next Saturday night at 8 p.m. Mountain, and I'll be here and I'll be in the chat. It just won't be a live stream like this one because, because of every reason I said earlier that I don't need to hash through. In the meantime, reach out in the comment section, reach out on the website. You guys know how to find me, you know where to get a hold of me, and look for some new, better quality videos from yours truly. And thank you for being a part of the channel, and I will talk to you guys soon.